Evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends, supporters of ACM, the Active Citizens Movement, our members, supporters, comrades. Thank you all for joining us this evening for the launch of the book The Shadow State by Jeff Wicks. We really appreciate you all making the time to be with us today, and we extend a special welcome to the Deokaran family who are also present here with us. On behalf of NB Publishers, Exclusive Books and the Active Citizens Movement, welcome, and we hope that you will enjoy the rest of the evening with us. I now call upon Mr. Aslam Mayat, who will say a few words of welcome on behalf of the Active Citizens Movement. Thank you.
Fortunately, I'm same height as Yashika. For the Active Citizens Movement, I deputize for the modest Pops Rampasad. Avalon Group, forged under the pioneering vision of late Musa, succeeded against Herculean odds of apartheid buttressed by big bad business. AB carries the baton of this progressive space, given Mahala for GBV, etc. Viva Avalon Group shout out. News 24 and Jeff Wicks covered the dark underworld of organized crime, corrupt cops, police killing crews. The cat did not get Jeff's tongue on 9 Lives Vusi Musi. Accused of murder, under police investigation for 2.3 billion Tembisa looting, cat gets 360 million police tender. Forget about we have the best whistleblowing and labor laws and constitution in the world. Babita, just study her phone and computer. Just do your damn job. Jeff 8 days in July on the riotous nights over Jay-Z, when government, police, and the rather farcically termed crime intelligence went AWOL, leaving citizens to fend for themselves. We in KZN pray that we're not back here for Jeff's sequel after the disrespectful Duduzile has her badge of honor day in court. ACM is part of the whistleblowing space, having brought together whistleblowers who are ignored, isolated, under siege, loss of jobs, wealth, family, health, reputation, and even life. ACM hosted Cynthia Hijackers on board Stimple, who as group treasurer saved the taxpayer 256 million rand by tipping treasury. She lost her job, income, and reputation. Despite all the praise and laudable sentiments from government, Cynthia unsurprisingly received no job offer or board position from SAA or any other state body or SOE. ACM is invested in hero Babita, having had the memorial with her family at Heritage Center, another progressive space in Durban. Babita is the romantic, classic whistleblower, clean as a whistle. But whistleblowers come in 50 shades of grey, even from the belly of the beast. The Disclosures Act has not provided protection. ACM made representations to whistleblowing reforms on the ineffective laws grounded in the labor relations arena. NACAC has, in commendably record time, presented a final report on anti-corruption. I speak only on the interim measures ACM proposed: witness protection, job security, financial assistance, legal assistance, and other critical issues and relief that were readily implementable. NACAC did not find favor with ACM interim proposals and recommended instead to the President that he publish in the weekly letter how important whistleblowers are to the fight against corruption, have meetings with whistleblowers to pat them on the back, educate the ministers on the importance of whistleblowing, and last but not least, give posthumous state honors to assassinated whistleblowers. Perhaps instructing crime intelligence police and NPA to convict the not 150 rand, but 10,000 rand bucket list masterminds instead of warring against each other. The Minister of Police and Commissioner were at cross purposes over 121 idle dockets. How could anyone make so blatant a sick joke in a health facility to manufacture fictitious R500,000 invoice for skinny jeans? It comes from arrogance, of knowledge of absolute impunity, going way beyond and above the Triple Nelson 111 officials implicated 4 years later only because of Jeff's persistence. Perhaps spending a fraction of 600 million on whistleblowers enhancement might be more productive. Just to round up, responsible reporting. International media is barred from Gaza, where Israel murdered 280 and counting media staff. That's 1 in every 3 days. Let that sink into the SA apologists of the Holocaust in Gaza. Is media independence covertly threatened? Sunday Times, Citizen and BizNews go on a PR junket to Israel paid by SA Jewish Board of Deputies. So-called balanced articles from the staff, Zionists appear. Only when outed do they, under compulsion from the Ombud, discuss the possible bias. We have journalists like Jeff, and we also have SARS Rogue Unit and Tembisa 10 decuplet journalists. Babita blew the whistle. She faced disciplinary action, was suspended without pay, then removed from procurement oversight. She persisted. Babita was murdered. Her hitmen start eligible for parole in 2026. Auta got Dudu Mayeni declared a delinquent director. Each of us has a duty to get involved in civic activism and make sure Babita did not die in vain. Honoring Babita and Jeff is a start, but we cannot simply pat them on the back like couch potatoes. No one but us can kill the cancer of corruption. ACM calls for Babita's death anniversary, 23rd August, to be declared National Whistleblowers Day.
Thank you, Aslam. Jeff Wicks this evening will discuss his book, his investigation, his writings in conversation with Dasan Tatia. So I'll hand over to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So I just want to start on a personal note and tell you why today is so important for me, because it's not just another public engagement and this is not just another book launch. It's so much deeper than that, because I know this guy for many years. I think we met in 2007, 8, somewhere there, and we actually started working together at that point and built a very strong relationship. So I regard Jeff as more than just an excellent journalist, a colleague, and all of those things. He's actually a brother, and he's someone that I'm really honored to be here, to be the one sitting next to him, to have this conversation with all of you. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, because I don't normally say very nice things to Jeff, so I figured I'd do it here. When I read this book, and I have to admit, I read the last chapter today, just today. I spoke to him this afternoon and I said that I saved the last chapter for today because I wanted it to be really fresh, and I wanted it to be top of mind when I came here tonight. I read the other bits of it when I traveled to Cape Town last week. I think I finished about half of it, and I'd started it a few days prior. The one thing that I'll say that really stuck out is that if you read this book and you don't find yourself getting angry, I suggest you read it again. So I'm not here to ask you to throw your popcorn across the room and turn over the tables here. I'm asking you to get angry, because that kind of anger, when it's constructive, is actually what sparks change. So we need more and more people to be angry about what happened to Babita, because she's been failed in so many other ways, and Jeff has outlined that beautifully in his book. So besides all of the other emotions that come out of this, that one for me sticks out. And it's what you do with that anger after reading this book, and after sitting here and listening to this conversation, that will determine what happens to other Babitas. But I'll leave it there. I said to Jeff, I did warn him that I'd probably go on, because it's such an emotive topic and it's so personal. But let me turn this discussion to you, Wicks. I'll start at the end. You said something right at the end, something in this book that stuck out for me amongst the many things that did. You said that you think that you failed. Probably many of the people here, even without having read the book, but having read the articles that you wrote on this topic, would say otherwise. Why did you say that?
It's good to sit across from you, and it's good to have this discussion, and thank you for everyone who's come out to listen to us. It's been a slow realization for me, and I still believe that I've failed in many ways in pursuing the story. And the reason behind that is that you look to the genesis of my involvement on the story and my first encounters with the Deokaran family. And it was several weeks after Babita was murdered, and we were obviously pursuing it as a News 24 investigative project. And I met with Rakesh Deokaran, Babita's brother, and I was desperately trying to get him on board. And I was trying to tell him that I wasn't in this to chase a headline or to get a simple story, and I didn't want to meet with him so I could take down a couple of by-the-by quotes. I actually wanted to get to the bottom of this, and the promise that I made to the Deokaran family was central to that, and that was that I strongly believed in my heart that what happened to Babita was a grave injustice, and one with dire ramifications, not only for other whistleblowers, but for our democracy. And because it was so important, that double weight of a personal tragedy and a personal loss for the Deokaran family, and also the implications for our nation, I promised them that I would follow the story to the very last. I would, until there would cease to be breath in my chest, I would chase the story. And I would chase it because the people behind Babita's murder deserve to be brought to account. And I've often looked at what we produce, not only in the way of news stories, but now looking at the book, and what I wanted to try and achieve, it was lofty. I wanted there to be justice for Babita, and I wanted her family to get closure. And I think if I've given them anything, it's been answers. But justice is still completely elusive. We know that the 6 hitmen who entered in a plea and sentencing agreement with the state were sentenced to between 6 and 22 years. So some of those guys have the potential to come out next year. And it's been nearly 1,500 days since Babita was slain. And that entire period, the mastermind who ordered her killing has been able to breathe free air. Contrast that against what the Deokaran family has lost. Babita's daughter, Theara, she passed her driver's license on the first attempt. She got several distinctions in high school. She's flourishing now in university. She went to her matric dance. Babita got to see none of that. And that to me is a grave injustice that has never sat well with me and never will. And that's why I do believe that I've failed. But what I have undertaken to do is that this story will never leave my diary. I firmly believe that it won't. The nature of the work that we do means we have to be pulled in several directions, because at the heart of what investigative journalists do is corruption. And as I don't need to explain to any of you, and it should shock no one, that it is endemic, it is everywhere, and it's overwhelming. That said, I fully intend to keep my promise to the Deokaran family and pursue this to the end, exercising every avenue I can, knowing that I am but a mere journalist. And my job is to inform all of you and allow you to make decisions when you go make your X at the ballot box. And to try and agitate for law enforcement reform so that there are no more Babitas, and to advocate for legislative procurement reform to negate the need for whistleblowers entirely. And I think that is now part of my burden going forward.
Again, I disagree with the use of the word failure, but you've brought to the fore so many things in this book, and I think something that we find in journalism is that we deal with these numbers, right? 100 million and 200 million, and I think even the public's tired of seeing those figures because they don't actually mean anything. But then when you contrast it with how those numbers now also mean that in many cases you have bodies piling up while people try to actually steal that kind of money. It starts to get a little more serious. How did you manage, you've had your eye on the ball, right? And you've been focusing on this story. How did you stay focused? Because while you were writing the story and while you were telling Babita's story, there were other Babitas and there were other millions that were being stolen. But yet you remained focused and you stayed the course.
I think the rarity of this story can be explained by the amount of evidence we were able to obtain. And, that was a mixture of luck and happenstance, but I'll explain it briefly. When I first got onto the story, I wasn't the only journalist covering it. There were many media houses following it. Babita was a known whistleblower. It was obvious she'd been eliminated. And what we needed to try and expound on is why, and who would have had a motive to kill her. And shortly after she was murdered, the Sunday World published a story. And in that was a WhatsApp message that Babita had sent to her boss. And it's a famous WhatsApp message now. It's actually on the back jacket of the book. And it says, "Good morning, CFO. I'm worried that the Tembisa guys might be onto us if we don't release their money, and our lives might be in danger." And less than a week after she sent that message, she was murdered. So that was key for me, and I became obsessed with getting my hands on her phone. And we knew the police had taken the phone and the laptop on the day of the murder, but it then required forensic imaging, and then it can be returned. And 7 months later, eventually, it was given back to the family, who very graciously, by that point, trusted me enough to give it to me. And we took those devices and had them forensically examined. And what we found shocked us. We found that they'd been taken by the Hawks on the day of her killing, and then had been left to gather dust in an evidence store for 7 months. They'd not so much as even been turned on. And when we did our forensic examination, we found those messages, and we found the history of that conversation. So now we could place it into context. And when we got inside her laptop, where there were 60,000 Gauteng Department of Health emails, a rare view behind the veil that we would never otherwise be able to access that depth of documentation. And what that enabled us to do was to really tell a complete story. And I remember when I first did my planning, I'd planned a series of 8 stories which I felt each touched on important syndicates and things that we'd found. We ended on 40 stories. So this was way bigger than we ever imagined. And because of what we uncovered, it enabled us to follow it further. Every time we published, it would shake the tree and more people would come forward and would get further information, and we could go deeper and follow the money. And that's really what we wanted to do. Was we could see that, well, Babita had flagged 850 million rand in procurement, which had been sort of effected in the space of just 4 months. Now that's mammoth for a state medical facility. It's nearly R1 billion in the space of 4 months. So there was obviously something amiss at that hospital. We now know that the extraction is worth 2.3 billion rand in 2 years. And that's from a single hospital. So those numbers should shock people. And in your prelude, you are right. We've become inured by these cases of corruption and these endless numbers of this amount has been stolen. But what I wanted to show was, well, where did that money go?
That's a microcosm, right?
It's a complete microcosm, and it should devastate us to understand that this was able to happen in just 4 months from one facility. What about Mamelodi Hospital? What about Chris Hani Baragranith? What about Prince Mshieni? What about RK Khan? The way they did it was so ingenious.
Yeah.
This could be happening everywhere. And it really makes you wonder about the loopholes which are specifically inserted into our procurement legislation to allow for this patronage to happen.
So now there's this template of how these unscrupulous types manage to extract money from these hospitals, these public health facilities and other government agencies. But then you also highlighted the failures of the entities that are meant to be there to protect us. And that was pretty clear. In this instance, the Hawks, that was quite clear, right? But since then, nothing has really changed to strengthen that. If anything, if you look at the turmoil that we see in that space, it doesn't give us much hope, right?
It should give us pause, and we should all be concerned, because what we're seeing now at the uppermost ranks of the police is it's happening in public view now, but this has been happening for years. and it contributes towards the dysfunction that we've now come to expect from law enforcement. It should shock all of us that the police have set themselves a murder detection rate of 11%. That's their expectation, to be able to solve 1 in 10 murders. So really, any of you in the crowd have murderous intent, do it. Because there's only a 10% chance that you'll be caught.
Yeah.
And how can we be comfortable with this? It should make us all physically angry. Because, and this is also in a country where last year there were 26,232 murders. So what of the forgotten 9? And then what of all those people who don't have a bothersome journalist who gets a bee in his bonnet and will hound and follow the Hawks investigation? And that's what we did. We were able to prove and shame them by saying that they completely cast aside her phone and her laptop as of evidentiary value.
And then when you took it to them, they said the investigation is still ongoing, so we can't actually answer your
and
questions.
That's the popular refrain. You know, that's what keeps us in the dark. The investigation is ongoing, we can't talk about it. And because they put up that refrain, there's no accountability for the police officer who should have been doing his job. They cast aside the laptop as evidence. We got it. Within 10 minutes, we found Babita's report. Just by searching Tembisa, we found the report, possibly fraudulent payments out of Tembisa Hospital, the singular 10-page document that likely got her killed. Now, I'm no policeman, but I am someone who can use logic. And if someone has been murdered, then we must try and find out who would have a motive to kill this woman. And I'm sorry, but even if you're the dumbest Keystone cop on the planet, the reality is, if Babita threatened an 850 million rand, in actuality a 2.3 billion rand illicit revenue stream, why would you not look at that report? We found it. Then it gets worse, and I don't want to give away too much of the book, but the police had the shooter in custody, and they released him without charge. We only found that out 3 years later when the trial was concluded, or the plea was concluded. And what happened to the police officer running with the case? He was promoted from captain to lieutenant colonel. And this is one failure that we know about. We know about it because there was a journalist who went to go look. What about everyone else? What about all the other murder victims and the forgotten 9 families who will never get justice? So that's a trope in the book. It's failure and dysfunction of law enforcement, and it manifested in Babita's case. Again, something we should never sit and just accept.
We've been talking a lot about whistleblowers, and you speak about it a lot in the book, and Babita paid with her life. Fortunately, in the aftermath, you were able to I wouldn't say complete her investigation, but you were able to build on it. And that's great, because this is where we are. But the one thing that's clear in South Africa is that whistleblowers are not safe. One of your objectives, I imagine, in writing this book is to expose this level of corruption, and everyone needs to play a part. But how then do you encourage them to do that if they know that their lives are going to be on the line?
That's the fine line to walk, because I think in death, Babita has become a symbol for not only whistleblowing, but good, ethical civil servantry. A woman who actually put the servant in civil servant. Someone who was unable to look away when she saw wrongdoing. I don't think she set out to be a whistleblower, but she's become one in death. And I think the murder of Babita Deokaran had very specific intentions. Number one, to remove her as an obstacle to this extraction, this rabid extraction from Tembisa Hospital, but to send a message to anyone else who was willing to raise up their hand and say, not on my watch. And the damage that does is not only felt in the health department, it is seen by every other ethical civil servant who says, well, if I speak up, and I had a civil servant come to me last night at a book launch and say, I work in a government department, and everyone has a cousin or brother who is getting the tenders on behalf of that family. It is everywhere. And people are unwilling to speak up, and they'll be cowed by fear. And that's why it was important to tell the story, because it reflects the everyday reality that South Africans face. And it's important to tell it in the most vivid degree possible, because the damage of this is near impossible to measure. How will we ever know how many people didn't come forward, who didn't raise their voices, who stayed silent? And that's what we need to correct. We correct that by holding the villains in the story to account as far as we can, understanding that we are just mere journalists and some of you are mere activists and mere citizens, but we all have a role to play to try and correct this, because if we don't, we risk slipping into mafia state and backslide territory if we're already not there.
The system is so broken, Wicks, and it was clear because when Babita spoke to someone that she thought that she trusted, a superior, thinking that she was doing something good, it then ended up with her dying. Do you think, with the system being so rotten, so broken, is there anything that can be done, any structures that need to be in place, any changes that we could see that would actually protect whistleblowers, that would allow them to expose this type of corruption and, I wouldn't say fix the system, but at least improve where we are?
That's a great question. And I'd just like to start with speaking a bit about Babita's direct manager, Lerato Maggio. When you buy the book, you'll see this is her face at the bottom here. Now, what happened with her was that she was the one who received Babita's report, and she was also the one who lied to Babita and said, this matter has been raised with the HOD, it's receiving attention, we will investigate. And her report basically asked for two things. It was to place a freeze on 100 million rands worth of outgoing payments, and then investigate 850 million rand in procurement deals. Lerato Maggio never raised that up the chain of command. After Babita died, her report was buried, nothing was done. And I mean buried to the extent that when we first started asking her questions about it, they denied its existence. Then we published the emails with the report and could prove that she'd received it. And lo and behold, the 100 million rand that Babita had frozen was unfrozen, and it was sent to its beneficiaries. So that's Lerato Maggio's role in this, either so beyond negligent and inept that she allowed it to happen, or she was complicit. And I'll leave you to decide once you read the book and we've laid out the set of facts. But how do we fix this? It's relatively easy. We are now in the year 2025. We send people into space, but South Africa cannot develop an online procurement portal that would have the checks and balances built in that remove the human frailties of the system. Tembisa was allowed to become a trough because they bought the entire value chain, from the person originating the order to the SCM staff. Everyone was in cahoots working towards a common goal. An electronic portal with checks and balances and guardrails in place removes the human from the equation, and it becomes difficult to then tamper with documents or use outdated documents. And I mean, it beggars belief almost that if you, I mean, I hope none of you are tenderpreneurs, you may be, but if you were to go submit a tender, even to an SOE, it would be required in paper. You must go drop it in a box. It's like we live in the dark ages, and that's foisted upon us because it allows the loopholes to continue, and it allows the extraction to continue, and that extraction fuels patronage and has become completely intertwined with politics. That is the status quo. We all know it. We read about it every single day. And if we want to fix it, there needs to be political will to do so. And you cannot tell me that in 2025 it's impossible, because that's just a bald lie.
Wicks, I want to move to the other part of this book, which is what I really appreciated. It was the human element. And you've always told a human story. You've always been good at telling human stories. And you really did that. When you captured, even though you're not a relative, probably, I mean, you've never met Babita, but you were able to capture her essence through that book and through the trust that you built with the family. I remember saying to you the other day that something that caught my attention was that you were able to bring in the cultural nuances so well for someone that is generally unfamiliar with the culture. And how did you do that?
And so it was by making myself a feature in the Deokaran home. And I mean, I have Uncle Tony and Babita's brother and all of her relatives. She comes from such a wonderful, beautiful, tight-knit family, and they were so welcoming of me, just willing to just sit with me and talk to me about Babita and talk about her stories. Because it was one of the greatest challenges in writing this book was that I'd never met Babita. And now I need to encompass who she was, because not telling that story of her life, being a single mom who doted on her daughter, and being a loving sister who would pepper her siblings with recipes, and and we saw that on her cell phone. We could see the love in the family, and I'm honored. I'm honored that the Deokaran family trusted me enough to let me be the one to tell the story. And I feel privileged to do so, and I'm indebted to them for all of their time and everything that they've given me. Even though we will need to talk about how spicy we make the food when I come to visit. It's delicious, but my body reacts in a way that makes it seem like it's not. It's merely a physiological reaction. And that's something I need to work on, which I will. But, I remain indebted to the Deokaran family for letting me be the one to tell the story, and I've tried to do so responsibly. And as an honorary member of the Deokaran family, an honor which was bestowed on me last week, I consider that one of my greatest prizes. And I'm sure now that I'm a member of the family that I will get feedback if I've done a bad job. But, it's part of the story that could not go untold, because it's part of the human tragedy, and it's an exemplar for us to understand that corruption is not a victimless crime, especially when you steal from the state. Yes, they have unlimited budget funded by the taxpayer, but when anyone stands in the way of these illicit revenue streams and these underworld networks, they're eliminated. That's a victim.
So the cost is counted in bodies, right?
The cost is counted in bodies, and then we can expound on that further by saying, okay, our state hospitals are generally in some degree of disrepair, whether it's understaffing, and it's particularly bad in Gauteng. I mean, recently, the Gauteng Health Department had to return 700 million rand to Treasury, which was destined for cancer patients. That means that if you are unfortunate enough to suffer from cancer and you are indigent, the government hospitals cannot help you. You may as well start planning your funeral. It's a fait accompli. And then what about all the patients of Tembisa Hospital who are now without equipment and without staff and without PPE? And the cost is measured in lives. And we need to draw the connection between the extraction and theft and the human toll at the end of it. Life Isidimeni is another example. A pure campaign to embark on cost cutting. And what they did was send hundreds of mentally challenged, indigent, vulnerable people basically to their deaths, who were tortured and starved to death, 141 people. I would expect a louder, audible gasp. And no, but I mean, that's the point. You are now inured to this. We are confronted with it every single day. And we need to be angrier about it. We have to be. Because you get what you put up with. And that's where things need to change.
This book is honest. And I think that's what appealed to me. Because, again, I know Jeff for a long time. And while I was reading it, there were certain things that you'd written. And I thought, no, I can hear him saying this. And especially the sarcasm, I mean, that came through very strongly in the book. And I appreciated that. And I think that you'll appreciate that honesty as well, because that's what you need. We have enough of the acceptance of all of the wrongdoing and all of the people that are taking us for a ride. When you were writing this, and you were then putting all of these pieces together, was that a natural type of element that slipped in? Did you find a need at any point in writing the book? Did you feel that you needed to step into Jeff the journalist mode and remove all of that, or was it just this natural trait that you brought forward?
I try not to limit myself with my sarcasm and my general bile, because
I know that.
I mean, this story makes me angry. It makes me angry when I talk about it. And of course, as journalists, we must be balanced, but really and truly, our only allegiance is to the fact. And I can back up every word in that book.
Yeah.
So I challenge any of the villains to come and sue me. I will happily take your money. But beyond that, it was also about my story and telling that as well, because this has not been an easy assignment. You know, investigative journalism is seldom glamorous, and it by and large has been the most challenging assignment of my career, not only because it's been so long, but because it's so complex in its nature. And in essence, the story I wanted to tell was how we tried to finish Babita Deokaran's work.
Yeah.
And the book begins with her death, and then it follows how we tried to peel back the layers and tried to finish that last investigation that she'd embarked on. That was so important, not only for the Gauteng Health Department, but for the people of South Africa. And that's what I hope resonates with people. It will give you a view of what journalism looks like from behind the headlines and behind the stories. And you'll get an understanding of what it took from me and what it took from my family and my life, not writing the book, but telling the story.
Balancing the personal ledger, is that what you called it?
And it's this weird existential conversation that you must have with yourself as a journalist. Not only investigative journalists, all journalists. There will be times in your career where you're confronted with the potential that a story could cost you your own life. And then you as a journalist must decide what the value of that truth is. Is it worth telling the story? And don't get me wrong, this is not an exercise in my bravado. I was shit scared at times.
Yeah.
When we found Babita's report, we knew that it was a document that she had probably died for filing. And now we would inherit that danger. And we would inherit that danger in a way that is very public. We push these stories out to millions of people, and my byline is there, because that gives us credibility. It's a layer of credibility that journalism desperately needs, just to avoid having a Tembisa 10 babies scenario. So you are reading my work. I'm placing myself in the open. And there were times where you sit and you consider the permutations and you think, well, perhaps I will die in my car. Perhaps I will meet the same fate as Babita, because these are men who have killed before.
You said you were waiting for the bullets to come.
I have not had a comfortable drive in 4 years. It's a constant exercise of, have I seen that car before? How many people are in it? Are the windows down? Why is it driving so erratically? I change my routes when I travel. The schedule, I don't have a schedule. I leave at different times, I go home at different times.
And you also had that ugly work car at some point.
I have a fleet of ugly work cars to change up my pattern. And you know, at first I thought perhaps you're just being paranoid. But I'd rather be paranoid and try and sort of alter that and weaponize it into hypervigilance, because the unfortunate reality, as well as this will not be the last dangerous story that I pursue, because corruption is so endemic. And we've got to change the way we perceive it. These are not just unctuous individuals like Edwin Sodi, who have this garish display of wealth. Corrupt networks that target the state's 1 trillion rand procurement spree annually have now become intertwined with the underworld. And if you threaten that, there will be consequences in some shape or form.
When you read this, you'll have an appreciation for what journalism is or what it was. I wrote something the other day and someone said, oh, it's so long, I wonder if it's AI. And I was like, no, we're too old school for that. But I mean, this is what it is, right? And that's why when you said now that you stand by everything that you've written there and no one could legally challenge you, it really holds water. What do you want anyone who reads this to take away from that? Take away from the effort that you've put in. You've put your life on the line, and you are now saying, look, essentially you're saying we need to stand up to this. But what for you is the takeaway for anyone who reads this book?
I think the takeaway should be twofold. I think firstly it's an acknowledgement of Babita's sacrifice. It should force every one of us, and please do this when you read the book, put yourself in her shoes. What would you have done if you'd found that spending pattern at Tembisa Hospital? That's the reality I'd like you to confront. And you honor her memory by doing that, by being insistent that Babita's memory not fade, like how many other whistleblowers we've seen who meet their demise because of corruption and are then forgotten because of a frenetic news cycle. And then secondly, it should make you angry. It should make you angry and it should make you scared. Because if this was able to be perfected by ordered syndicates at a single hospital, we don't know what we don't know. I can tell you that some of these syndicate bank accounts were receiving payments from the Gauteng Department of Education. They received payments from the Gauteng Department of Social Development. Some of the syndicate bosses you'll read about were being paid by hospitals in KwaZulu-Natal. This is here. It is everywhere. And, you know, it's something that I'm trying to advocate for is greater state transparency in the way that it spends its money. We have no view of that. If you ask for documents, and I mean, I've been locked in a legal battle with the Gauteng Department of Health now for 2 years to get payment records of another hospital where we will be going next. They've refused to relinquish them. And that's why, only reason why we were able to tell Babita's story in the vividness that we did was because we had an unimpeachable record on her laptop. It is not a controversial notion to have National Treasury account to us to say, I'm going to give you these company names, tell me what they've been paid. It's public money. It is your money. There should be a portal on National Treasury's website where you're able to go key in a company name and it should tell you which department have paid it, when, and how much. They tell us that's impossible. I say you are liars because you could do it during COVID. When there was all the noise about the corruption, we got those COVID-19 expenditure lists. What stops you doing it now? It's because you don't want us to see it. And that's what should infuriate all of you.
Wicks, this was a great read. I really enjoyed it. I hope that everyone here has the opportunity to read this book. You have to read this book. And when you do it, also just take a moment of silence for Babita and pray for this man's safety. Thanks, Wicks.
Thank you.
And yes, we will continue to expose, to advocate, to support whistleblowers, to call out the trillions to which people think they are not accountable to us as citizens for. So we would like at this point to open up for any questions to Jeff Wicks. And yes, there's a roving mic that Shakira is taking around.
Just a note before questions are posed. I want to try and accommodate as many people as possible, so I just ask that you keep your questions crisp and limit yourself to one. And try and refrain from making statements. I will shake your hand and hear you after we're done.
Hi, Jeff. This is just, I actually had 3 questions, but they're very short. The investigating officer, right, was he simply incompetent or complicit or a little bit of both? All right, just your thoughts on that. And then also the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council, their report came out last week, and they said they are looking at an OPI, which is basically an omnipotent body to fight corruption. Your thoughts on that, and perhaps Dacian's as well. And then the last question, is this going to end when the ANC is out of power?
Thank you for the loaded last question. I love that. I'll start with the first. So Captain Masentleni Percy Chauke, let's say his name, it's in the book. And also just one last disclaimer on Lorato Maggio, she's changed her name now to try and avoid the stench of corruption. Don't stress, her new name's in the book. So Captain Chauke is either inept to the point that he struggles to dress himself in the morning, or he's complicit in some way. I don't have proof that he threw this investigation. So I leave it to you to read and look at the catastrophic series of missteps and think to yourself, how can the supposed cream of our law enforcement crop be responsible for such things? The question about NACAC. I'm not certain that the lofty ideals enclosed in that report can be achieved, but I would like to go further and say we have the opportunity, if we eliminate something like a paper base, we know procurement is a site of corruption. That's the golden thread that moves through our corruption landscape. Let's kill it at the source. Of course, responsibility and accountability is important, and we should hold these people to account, but let's kill it at the source. Let's rid ourselves of most of the corruption. When the tide is stemmed, then we go after the villains. That's what I feel. Will it end when the ANC is out of power? I have a cynical view of most politicians, because every human is fallible and every human can be bought, especially politicians we've seen. But that said, many lines of extraction that we uncovered during the story link directly back to Luthuli House. And I mean, it links back to the union buildings. One of the main syndicate bosses was President Cyril Ramaphosa's nephew. We have the ANC chair in Ekurhuleni, Selo Felice Koko, who took tens of millions of rands through 3 companies using vastly inflated prices, which we were able to prove. He's still in active politics. And he had a bit of a hiatus after we outed him so vividly, but don't stress, he's back at the Gauteng Department of Health. Now he's delivering toilet paper by the truckload. So it's this endless loop of evasion and avoiding accountability that has to stop. We have to have people feeling the pinch here. And it's either through civil litigation, but ideally, we should be locking people up for corruption. And why I say that is that the SIU is looking at in the neighborhood of 15,000 individual payments. One instance of fraud carries a 15-year jail term. Just hit them with one. Prove it, and they're going inside. We need to also be circumspect about how we have our law enforcement investigate and then prosecute these cases.
It's Pastor Tony.
I want to answer one of those questions. Sorry, Jeff. I just want to respond to the first question that the last speaker has spoke about competence, whether the police officer, the investigating officer was competent or not. But immediately after Babita passed away, myself and her brothers and one of her sisters, we went over, I'm Babita's brother-in-law in fact. So we went over to meet the investigating officer. And I don't want to mention his name right now. But we had an interview with him, and thereafter we met him on several occasions. And he informed us that there was interference from politicians and from a very high ranking position in the police department that wanted the docket and wanted to know what's happening. And at that stage, he assured our family, the Deokaran family, that he is not giving in to that. And lo and behold, a few months later, he was replaced by the investigating officer that you mentioned in the book that took over this. And up to today, he's still a family friend on the phone. He kept to his word, and he was honest, and he didn't sell the case, if I can put it that way. And he was taken out of his position. Thank you.
Can I go for it? Hi, I'm Alison Skuman, aspiring politician, attorney, officer of the court. So what we are discussing here is obviously very disappointing. I just want to know, did you at any chance have an opportunity to interview Minister Cele at the time and get his view on the failure of police, law enforcement, and detectives? And secondly, are you going to be taking up Makwanazi's release to the public and follow that story and do what you did for Babita and that? Because I think that's important as well when you stand behind somebody that is so brave to go public and expose these things?
So the first question first, no, I never engaged with former Minister Cele. I didn't believe that it would achieve much, if anything at all, and I think I'm right. I did, however, try to engage with the various investigating officers. They all sent me packing, and now I know why. And on Mkhwanazi, I think we need to be cautious. You know, Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi is an incredibly popular figure, especially in this province, and he's popular because he takes no nonsense. You know, criminals seem to die. I think I even commented on one of the, I mean, this is a man who knows about what being busy is like from Mkhwanazi. And I commented on one of his posts, and I said, I don't even think the police in KwaZulu-Natal are issued with handcuffs anymore, just body bags on their hips. We mustn't celebrate that. We should never celebrate an abandonment of due process. I understand why people want to, because we've been so beaten down by crime. But do you remember the last time we lost due process? It was pre-1994. We cannot afford to go back there. I understand why he's seen as a hero. He's the hero that people want, but not necessarily the hero that people need. That said, he has pushed a lot of the dysfunction in top police management to the fore. We have been exposing the networks that he spoke about since the 17th of April last year. We were the first to break the story of Katiso Malefi, the mastermind behind the murder of Armand Swart, and now the alleged mastermind behind many other murders. Kat Matlala. Babita Deokaran was the first person to put him on anyone's radar. She found him at Tembisa Hospital. And while he was under investigation for procurement fraud by the police, he gets a 360 million rand tender from the police. Make it make sense. I can't. So yes, we will pursue every avenue possible, because what he has done, he has showed us how rotten things are in the uppermost ranks. And that's why this commission that we have upcoming is so important, because we've been yearning for reform in the way policing is enabled and executed in our country, because we must be frank, they have failed. The police cannot deliver on their constitutional mandate. And as I make these sweeping statements, I must acknowledge that there are still good cops. There are still good lawyers, but they operate in a system which is broken. They are paying for their own stationery. They are sharing cars. If they have a computer, they're lucky if it's a laptop. They're lucky if that software was updated since 2013. We do not enable the good cops to do the work, because they work in an environment where corruption is so rife they cannot trust their colleagues. It points to a greater issue, and it manifests in Babita Deokaran's case.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. I just want to give some insights as to how difficult it is to work in the space that Jeff is working and the active citizens movement. There has been reports of retaliation against whistleblowers in the Eastern Cape Department of Health, the Robben Island Museum, and now we heard about 2 days ago the government pension adjudicators, I think. So with the Robben Island Museum and Eastern Cape Department of Health, we've written to them a couple of months ago, asking them about, basically what we do. Why are you retaliating? What processes do you have, etc., etc. Up to now, we haven't had a reply from them. So our attorneys are considering making prior applications, which we'll do. Today, I just sent a letter to my chairperson regarding the government pensions. It's a 9-page document. We're sending to the Minister of Finance, the CEO of a forensic investigation firm. I won't mention the firm, but it's in Jeff's article. To the Public Protector, and that's the South African Human Rights Commission, inquiring about the contract that this firm got to find out who leaked the information regarding the 2 billion rand or 500 million. I can't remember the figure, Jeff.
Billions.
Billion, okay, that billion contract that was awarded. It's a difficult space. Further, a couple of months ago, we engaged with a company that's written a report on the so-called rogue unit. It's a big consulting company. And after to and fro, a couple of letters between us and them, the company, they handed us over to their lawyers. And the lawyers came back and said, my client refuses to engage with you. So we wrote back to the lawyer and said, listen, we're asking a simple question. We want them to account for who in the SARS rogue unit narrative, who was colluding with you, or you colluded with. So since then, this company has got a new CEO, so we're going to write to the new CEO now. So we're going to keep it. It's a difficult task that we have, but Jeff, we must do it. We've got to keep it into it, hold them accountable for things that they are not saying to the public.
You must be annoying, Pops. I'm professionally annoying. And I take pride in doing it every day.
Good evening, everybody. Special greetings to you, Jeff, industry colleague, brother Dissel, I always call him my brother, and everybody that's here, especially the Deokaran family. Perhaps my question would be, Jeff, have you ever maybe think about this Lerato character, or former Lerato now, that perhaps she might have been threatened as well to ever say anything regarding this saga? And I've interviewed quite a few whistleblowers as well, and what I've picked up in most cases is that they actually themselves are very scared. They get threatened all the time, their families and everybody that's around them. So my thinking around this Lerato character, I think she might have been threatened to ever speak, or I don't know. What's your thought on that? What's your view on that? Thank you.
I don't think that's the case, and I'll tell you why. So, the anomalous spending that was picked up by Babita should have been picked up by her. And on the prospectus of all of her actions, she looks complicit. And even if she was not complicit, even if she was threatened, the woman died. She was ripped away from her family. If there was ever time for a person to find some spinal fortitude and do the right thing, it's when she went to Babita Deokaran's house and pretended to be upset.
Yes, I think there was a hand up. Oh, it's okay.
Hi Jeff. Thanks very much. It's been great, and I recommend everyone to go and subscribe to News 24. Get a DSTV contract to watch ENCA. These are important stories that these guys tell, and they're working under tight budgets, and it's a difficult climate out there. So
he wasn't paid.
Please do your bit. My question is, I do a lot of campaigning in the local government space, so I have a fair understanding of the Municipal Finance Management Act, which has quite, even though it's not really followed, we know this, but there's quite a lot of requirements in Section 75 of what must be public. Through your inquiries and investigations, I imagine that would fall under the PFMA. What does that actually say in terms of what information must be made public?
Well, I must say I'm not as familiar with the specific clauses within the PFMA, but I will say that I'm of the view that public money is open to public scrutiny. It's your money. We all fund it, and I don't believe it's controversial to ask for records and then be given them. The state is meant to publish its tender documents when it awards tenders. I challenge any of you to go and find them. You will struggle. There's an intentional opacity in the way that the state spends its money, and the only conclusion I can draw is that they're afraid of what we'll find. So case in point, Tembisa Hospital, in effect, what Babita found and what our investigation has revealed is 2.3 billion rand that is now ripe for civil recovery. So as the health MEC, I was approached by a journalist and said, well, I've got evidence that something's happening at Mamelodi, show us your books. I'd be like, fantastic, find the money. We can get this money back. Why don't you? Why do they hide it from us? Why do they pay lawyers to help hide it from us? So, I think that strikes to the heart of the issue. And that said, I would be firmly behind strategic public interest litigation to force Treasury to produce an online portal. Because things like PIA are wonderful, in theory. They seldom work. PIA doesn't allow for continuous disclosure. You will get information that is outdated. Why can there not be a portal that I can find your company, which is public information, and I'll see who's paying you? Then I can go and ask questions of that specific department and try to justify that expenditure. And I'm sorry, we have these villains who now try to hide behind POPIA. It simply will not work. And we need further legislative reforms that strips them of privacy when you deal with the state. Of course, we must balance our constitutional rights, but as far as I'm concerned, if you're being paid by the state, you lose your privacy because you are now funded by the taxpayer.
Somebody at the back who had their hand up.
It's in your hand, go. You first.
Hello, my name is Kesh Devan and I'm a tax practitioner. I deal with a lot of clients that are engaged with the Financial Intelligence Center, and they have a lot of red tape around reporting of cash that's been received over a threshold of 50,000, etc. And the fines that these companies receive for not being compliant is exorbitant, and that's the small guys. Have you, in your investigations, come across the Financial Intelligence Center dealing with these companies that are getting these tenders, or in any of your investigations, and in any government institutes where they are implementing these rules with the government institutes?
I must say that the role of the FIC has been limited in our investigation. That's not to say that they probably weren't involved. By the sounds of things, if they're going after the small guys, they should be going after the big guys as well. The same should be said for SARS. I mean, you've got this armada of companies. I mean, one syndicate we identified was a husband, wife, a child, and a cousin. Between them had 17 entities, all in simultaneous trade with the hospital, that extracted at least 250 million rand in 2 years. Would it surprise you to know that none of those companies were VAT registered? Would it surprise you to know that none of them were registered with the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, which requires a license to deal in medical goods? The system is broken. Those checks and balances exist in the way we procure things. You must be compliant. They were forcefully ignored for the reasons of extraction. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't answer your question, but I spoke around it.
So Nora first, and then the gentleman at the back. Thank you.
Yes. Greetings, everyone. I'm Dr. Nora Saneka, Chair of the Active Citizens Movement. And here we can see the importance tonight of social solidarity, that one person's voice on their own is easily targeted. If we unite together, we're able to support each other and fight against this evil. So my question is whether Jeff sees any connection between the present scapegoating of foreign nationals outside hospitals and medical facilities here in South Africa and the looting of our health system. Thanks.
I'm so glad you asked that question. I'm so glad, because I had a similar question last night, saying, what about all the foreigners who are eating up our health budget? I don't know about the whole health ecosystem, but I know a lot about Tembisa Hospital. And I can tell you that every single person extracting funds from that facility is a homegrown, proud South African. The foreigners do not place a burden on our healthcare networks. They don't spend the money correctly. If they put put value for money at the heart of state procurement, which is where it should be, we would have an abundance of resources.
Yes.
We wouldn't need aid from the orange man. It's convenient now that we can scapegoat and blame foreign nationals. They're an easy villain to sketch for people who are unwilling to confront the sad reality that it's our people who are doing the stealing.
It's okay, so the gentleman at the back, and then Ashok, and okay, last five. So please go ahead.
Sorry, apologies. I think you can hear me then.
Yes.
Okay, so my question, right? I'm assuming, that, not assuming, it seems clear that Babita caught these transactions at the point of payment, right? Who signed off on the invoices that they should be paid? From the technical side or from the budget holders' side? What did you find? Who were the major players there?
Also
I'm
an excellent
hearing
question.
about Larato.
Yes, that's true. But the reality is, and what you'll find is that those extractors at Tembiso Hospital have captured the entire value chain. From the point that the order was originated, the need was contrived, it went to the Budget Control Commission, or committee rather, and a lot of the spending at Tembiso Hospital was done when the facility had a negative budget. Then it goes to the Supply Chain Management Office and they engineer an outcome by picking 3 companies, none of which were used or found using the CSD as a guide. You pick 3 entities within the same network, the outcome is engineered, it's signed off by the hospital CEO, it goes up to procurement at the provincial office, they issue a PO, it goes back to the company and they get a goods received certificate and they are paid. The entire value system was captured because there's no evidence to suggest that anything was actually even delivered to Tembiso Hospital.
What about the skinny jeans?
Skinny jeans, prime example. Couldn't find them. The bonded leather wingback chairs, like you would see in a cigar lounge. Tembiso Hospital bought 150 of them. Couldn't find those either.
Thank you.
Ashok Chandika from Active Citizens Movement. Just 2 points. One, the role of the banks and the banking system. Has that been elucidated enough? Are they being bypassed in this whole shenanigans that are going on, and don't they have a lot to answer for? Because it's their systems, it's their accounts, it's their transactions where the money is flowing. And as the late former minister said, Praveen Gordon, you need to follow the money. He also said join the dots, but you also need to follow the money. And the second question is about those police dockets. Must contain a mine of information. Do you think that the name of the mastermind is in that docket, and is it imminent that it will be revealed soon?
I do think the banks have a role to play, but it speaks to the point I made earlier about overall transparency. Banks are obligated, I think they're called suspicious transaction reports to the FIC. I would love for those to be made public, but we have to balance people's legitimate right to privacy versus, our right to understand how state money is spent. So I think there's validity in calling for further transparency in that respect. And your second question, sir, I'm going to decline to answer. Thank you.
Is it in the book?
A lot of the talk has been on murder and so on, but there's also loss of jobs, family breakup, people being taken through disciplinary processes. So that's also another huge threat that people face.
Yeah, absolutely. Whistleblowers don't have it easy. We know that. Babita was case in point because she paid the ultimate price, but there's people like Johan van Lockenberg from SARS who did his best to take on powerful politicians. His family was destroyed in the process. He's a good man who was broken, and the media was complicit in that. My former colleagues at the Sunday Times, it's a badge of shame. Again, it speaks to urgent need to reform whistleblower protection. these people are not celebrated. And we've seen it now, as Pops mentioned, at the Gauteng, the Government Pension Administration Agency. Sorry, such a minnow department, but trying to spend 1.1 billion rand on a lease of a building that the company who they've signed with doesn't even own. So yes, we need to do more to protect whistleblowers.
I think there's somebody at the back. Delwyn? Yes.
Is this the last one?
Hi, sorry. I just want to follow up what Pop said. He didn't go into details about Robben Island. I was a member of the board for 3 years, and there was corruption, oil missing, tickets sold at the hotels, right? Cell phones disappearing, property of the museum situation. So we reported this matter to the Minister for Tourism and all that, and we were summoned to a head office, to the Minister's office. 8 or 10 of us, including the notorious Carl Niehaus, was a member of the board, Popo Molife, the late Ibrahim Ismail, Philip Dexter, just to name a few. We resigned in block because of the corruption. I told the minister, I must apologize to you, Jeff, that this, what I'm talking about is not in the book, because it's such a vast area, is that I told the minister the 10 years I spent in Robben Island, I was a happier person than being in the board. Why? Couldn't take the nonsense that was going on there. And the chairperson, I wouldn't mention his name, giving the cell phones to his children, right? Situation. And then Jack White was trying to bribe, name the Olympic Stadium or World Cup Stadium after Robben Island. Invited us to a posh seafood restaurant, so one way of bribing the board situation. But having said that, we resigned and the minister accepted our resignation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just would like to respond to that. So if you spend 10 years on Robben Island, then I need to thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for your sacrifice for helping us lead the lives that we live today. And your point about the board is well taken. It sounds like it's directly out of the state capture playbook. Remove the obstacles and extraction continues.
Thank you. So Lubna Nadvi, the last question.
Thank you. So I'm also a member of, I'm not sure if it's...
I think it's off, Lubna. Okay, so
thank you. My day job is as an academic and researcher, and one of the things that I've been researching is how South African citizens increasingly have had to take on the tasks that government is abdicating on service delivery. They're having to find their own water, they're having to dig their own boreholes, having to fill the potholes, etc. It seems that in the case of corruption or the whistleblower situation, citizens are increasingly having to also take on that task. So for example, Cynthia Stipples launches the Whistleblower House. There are other spaces where citizens are having to step in. So our government has abdicated its duties on those fronts. My question to you is, are we going to increasingly see more and more of this scenario where citizens are now stepping in and having to do the job that they expect government to do because government is failing? Clearly we do it better, or we have no other choice because we have to do it. But I'd just like your thoughts on that. Thank you.
No, I absolutely agree with you, and I think to a large extent you answered your own question. It's absolutely true. I mean, that's why we have these wonderful concept of urban improvement precincts. The entire municipality should be an urban improvement precinct, we should not have a situation where you're a victim of crime. Who do you call first, the police or your security company? That's a 4.5 billion rand industry that's spawned out of the failings of the state. And I do think that there will be many more, yes.
Thank you everyone for your questions. Is there one more? Okay, last one. This one's really the last one.
Do you think the Popeye Act was strategically conceived to hide and create the smokescreen where those who hide it or hide under it? And if it was, then how does civil society engage on this matter so that we can actually contest it and then bring that clarity that you speak about, where there's accountability and yet there's a sense of people's privacy being acknowledged?
I think the Popeye Act was drawn up with very noble intentions. And it also speaks to issues around PIA. Because fundamentally what Popeye was intended to achieve was to protect your privacy. I don't think it was ever intended for tenderpreneurs to hold it up and use it as a shield about Popeye, or for state institutions to use it as a shield to deny us information. I think your efforts would be better placed in advocating for the enforcement of PIA legislation. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with PIA, it's a Promotion of Access to Information Act. It sets out a wonderful process for you to request government documents. But they ignore it. I used the example of Mamelodi Hospital. We submitted a PIA application. They have 30 days to respond. If you receive no response, it's considered an automatic refusal. You then submit an appeal. They have 30 days to consider that. If you don't receive a response, you should consider your appeal dismissed. That happened. I went to the information regulator. I complained. They said I didn't use a form with their letterhead. I must file my PIAs afresh. I filed my PIAs afresh. They ignored me. I filed the appeal. They ignored it. I went to the information regulator. They subpoenaed the department. The department ignored the subpoena. We asked that it be referred to the Enforcement Commission. They said no. Then the department said, we'll give you the documents, but we're going to redact all the personal information because of Popeye. We entered into a settlement agreement in which we asked for payment records. They gave us payment records. They forgot that I had Babita's laptop, and I went and was able to prove that they left 50 purchase orders out. We also asked for all the audit and risk reports for years across all facilities. They gave us one. They gave us the one we already had. Oh, it's a cell phone, so I have a score. So legislation is willfully weaponized to keep us in the dark, and we need further enforcement from Chapter 9 institutions like the information regulator to hit these people with a bigger stick. Because if you want documents, PIA is there for you. But unless you have lawyers who are willing to take that fight to court when PIA fails, you're never going to get what you're looking for.